cybersecurity resource provisioning for small businesses. But I want to just talk just a little bit about kind of what it is that Project Spectrum is doing and really sort of level set on some of these acronyms that you may or may not be familiar with. So I'll ask you to bear with me if in fact you have a bit more knowledge in and around cyber and some of the impending regulations and guidelines and so forth. They're not only at the DOD level, but really more broadly across the whole of federal government as it pertains to sort of some of the lexicon, if you will, with which we're often dealing with, right, here in this world. So as someone so brilliantly put it, we are the victim of our expertise, right? We sometimes eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff, meaning folks that are on my staff and that are engaged in dealing with communicating this to various different audiences. And so I want to make sure I just sort of level set on some of the jargon and the verbiage that you'll hear me talk about, and then we'll get into kind of what is it that the cyber threat landscape looks like, and then ultimately what is it that Project Spectrum is doing to sort of meet that mission there insofar as helping small businesses understand, protect themselves against, and then continuously monitor those cyber threat vectors that are out there. So what are some of the terms that you'll hear today? Some of the terminology that you'll hear me talk about CMMC, or the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification, right? Which is a certification that ultimately derives, in its essence, it really derives from the NIST standards, that is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, right? So CMMC sort of pulls from NIST in that it looks at what is it that from an information security perspective, what is it from a guideline, from an overarching guideline that NIST is a standard, if you will, right? What is it that from a compliance program perspective can be nailed down in terms of what small businesses will need to meet, and then how does that factor in to helping small businesses prepare for being able to do business with the Department of Defense, right? So CMMC you can think of as if you will, again, the compliance arm of whether or not companies are meeting the litmus test as it relates to the handling of both controlled unclassified information as well as federal contract information, right? So information that is, yes, unclassified in and of itself, but when put together can have impacts on national security. And so therefore, what you hear about CMMC is in the DOD CIO is that they're helping to push these guidelines through. And right now we're at the point of impending codification or implementation, right, of the interim rule, right, that has been being reviewed at the DOD CIO level, and so making sure that companies, or that the DOD CIO is ready to implement that in a way that's going to help protect the small businesses, and more importantly, the infrastructure of small businesses, right? That they're able to exchange and delineate information between each other and other larger primes as it relates to contracting efforts with the DoD. So hopefully that just sort of helps. That's a roundabout way of saying CMMC is a cybersecurity maturity model certification. It's often thrown around as an acronym, but I wanted to make sure that we're very clear about kind of what it is and why it's important to the DoD, and thus why it is that Project Spectrum is able to help prepare small businesses for ultimate success, not only in their infrastructure, but of course as well in getting ready for that codification of that interim rule that's currently underway at the DoD CIO level. So with that being said, I want to just sort of jump right in, and if I can just talk a little bit about what is that our current cyber threat landscape looks like. Right. So we know that small businesses comprise more than 70% of the defense industrial base, right? We also know that 25% of DoD prime contracts are awarded to small businesses. And in that regard, some 40% of all cyber attacks are happening, right, to small and medium-sized businesses, right? So there is this need to be able to understand and help small businesses understand, again, those particular threat vectors that are often aimed at them. One of the sort of perceptions is that, oh, I'm a small business, I'm a micro small, and so I'm too small to be on the radar, right, of would-be attackers and those that would seek to compromise the integrity of the supply chain and the information therein. And so that's one of the things that we want to dispel, right? One of the myths that we want to dispel and just point out that these types of attacks are particularly damaging to small businesses because of the constraints that exist, right? So whether it's financial constraints, whether it's resource constraints, right? All of those factors come into play in terms of the susceptibility of certain cybersecurity attacks, particularly to those small businesses. So I just want to set that there. And then why are small businesses attacked? Well, we know that they have access to sensitive government information, intellectual property, connection with larger defense contractors. And again, this focus on production and meeting deadlines as opposed to what can seem like extraneous activity like cybersecurity, right? So when we talk about kind of at every phase of the life cycle that adversaries are looking to attack small businesses in particular, micro smalls as well, we know that the role of the federal government really is centered around, again, as it relates to cyber, is really strengthening cybersecurity best practices at every stage, helping companies ensure that the supply chain is secure, and then ultimately making sure that there is compliance with government mandates and requirements. And that's where you start hearing a lot of talk about NIST 800, 171, 172, as well as CMMC, right? We talk about the self-assessments for CMMC 2.0. And I think this is really where, and I'm just going to try to move this out of the way so that I don't block you guys' side here on the right hand side there. But really, when we talk about the self-assessments, and I'll talk about this quite a bit throughout the presentation because it really is one of the mainstays that help us really assist small businesses in understanding their kind of as is, if you will, security posture and infrastructure, and then gets us on the path toward looking at what their to be, if you will look like, right? So when we talk about CMMC level 1, we're talking about an annual self-assessment for contractors that are handling federal contract information only, okay? So CMMC level 1, FCI or federal contract information only, right? And again, if you're going for CMMC level 1, what this tells us is that, again, annual self-attestation suffices, right? So when you, for example, register in Project Spectrum, one of the things you'll be able to do is, and you'll do that, by the way, you'll register at projectspectrum.io. That is our main web portal that allows you to be able to take advantage of a myriad of resources, not the least of which obviously is the self-assessment here. But again, self-attestation suffices. So that means you can do the self-assessment on our site. We have a blog that walks you through how it is that you would upload that score into the SPRS system, or the Supplier Performance Risk System. Again, the Supplier Performance Risk System, that is where you would upload your score in accordance with the existing DFARS requirements, or the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. That is where you would upload that information. If you're going for CMMC level 2, that is depending on the level of controlled unclassified information you're handling. So again, let's start first there. At CMMC level 2, we're talking about the handling of CUI, or controlled unclassified information, right? So if you're going for level 2, there's going to be kind of 2 tracks, right? In terms of the controlled unclassified information that you're handling. In this case, as you see the first bullet there under CMMC level 2, split A, that's going to speak to controlled unclassified information at a non-prioritized acquisition level, right? This is a distinction that DOD, and a discernment for that matter, that DOD makes. It is something that would be communicated to you and that you would be aware of at the point at which an RFP is released. It'll tell you very clearly what level of a CMMC is required to be able to qualify for that particular solicitation or to be able to pursue that and respond to that solicitation. So, and in split B, we're talking about the converse, right, as it relates to CUI. That is CUI, or controlled unclassified information, at a prioritized acquisition level, right? Which means that the level of CUI that a company is handling in the eyes of the DoD has met a litmus test such that it is it is important to national security at a certain level, and therefore requires a company to meet with what's called a C3PAO, or a certified third-party assessor organization, right? Now, where can you find these C3PAOs, or certified third-party assessor organizations? Well, you can find them on the cyberab.org website. That is the cyber accreditation body's website. And remember, the cyber accreditation body works hand in hand with the DOD CIO. But what they do is they actually certify the assessors. So in other words, they have a very stringent criteria upon which, if an assessor wants to become an assessor, they then go before a set of guidelines and a set of requirements to be able to certify companies that are seeking CMMC certification, right? And so once they've met that litmus test that the Cyber AB sets forth, they then can train, or rather, certify other companies that are looking to meet and acquire that requisite level of certification. In this case, level 2, we're talking about here. Again, at the prioritized level, the third-party assessment is required, right? And that's every 3 years that happens, right? So when we talk about the prioritized acquisition, the main thing there is that you would have to meet with a certified third-party assessor organization. Again, you can find that under the Marketplace tab on the cyberab.org website. So please check that out, cyberab.org. And actually, Scott, if you could drop that in the chat for folks for easy access to be able to get there to the AB to be able to look at that marketplace. I believe there's about 100 or so. Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm thinking about our third-party tool reviews. We have over 100 of those. I'll talk about those a bit later. But there's a whole listing of all those C3PAOs that are certified and are authorized to be able to assess companies that are seeking CMMC certification. And again, uploading that score to the supplier performance risk system. Once you've got that self-assessment score, you can upload that to the supplier performance risk system, or the SPUR system, as we affectionately call it. And we have a whole blog on the projectspectrum.io website that walks you through exactly what to do in order to be able to upload that score there. It gives you a lot of good information there. So again, the only prerequisite to being able to access all of the resources that I'm going to be discussing here today is that you register with Project Spectrum. Again, it takes probably 2 minutes of your time. Some basic information will ask you about your company, and you'll have access to those resources there. So, cybersecurity for small business and the defense industrial base. Well, Project Spectrum is a DoD supported initiative through the Office of Small Business Programs. Again, provisioning comprehensive, cost-effective resources for small businesses, right? Well, what are those resources? Tools, right? Third-party tool reviews, as I talked a little bit about there. Trainings, online trainings, in various different formats. So we have small micro courses you'll hear me talk about, as well as full-length courses, right? That go a little bit more deeper and more granular into detail there. So what's our mission? It's centered around really this idea of readiness, resilience, and compliance for small and medium-sized businesses. And that's really where the rubber meets the road for Project Spectrum. We were developed, again, to help small businesses increase their compliance with cybersecurity standards, again, meeting those federal contracting guidelines and requirements. But it's more than that, right? We understand that, yes, we're helping small businesses meet sort of the guidelines that are set forth, right, as it relates to DoD and some of the impending finalization of those regulations. But bigger than that, is that we're also helping companies understand that their security posture is really a snapshot in time. What it looks like at any given moment could look very different in the future if there's not that continuous monitoring and that continuous vigilance. And so that's another big piece of it. All of our resources on Project Spectrum are at no cost to the user. I always say no cost as opposed to free, because we know there's a certain connotation with free, right? And that perhaps it lacks a level of robust nature, that the resources are not as comprehensive as in fact they are. So, but again, no cost to the user, and thanks in partnership to our relationship with the Department of Defense Office of Small Business Programs. Again, improving cybersecurity we know is going to help those small businesses, help protect their data, their revenue, right? Ultimately, their reputation, and of course, the intellectual property, which we cannot overstate. So we know that that's also going to help us at the national security level writ large, right? In terms of helping the broader community protect the supply chain and those derivative impacts. So what are Project Spectrum's offerings at a glance? We know that there's a team of specialized cyber advisors at the ready to assist small businesses. We also have an in-house developed cybersecurity training program that's delivered, by the way, on our customized in-house learning management system that we've built on a Moodle platform, which is an open source platform, which gives us a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to tailor, if you will, some of the trainings and some of the different offerings that we have. Self-assessments and for CMMC, and of course, NIST cybersecurity protocols. Strategic partnerships like the Mentor Protege program, the cybersecurity pilot within the Mentor Protege program that is facilitated by Project Spectrum. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well. The community outreach and engagements, events exactly like this, wherein we're targeting small business communities, where there's small business concerns, right, across the DoD, specifically helping companies that are looking to enter the defense industrial base, understand the requirements that are out there from a cyber perspective, and those that are already in the supply chain, right, helping to secure their environment, and thereby increasing the likelihood that they'll be able to stay in the supply chain, which is the goal. And that's, by the way, in keeping with the DoD Small Business Strategy Objective 3, where it calls out, again, that outreach, specifically 3.2, that calls out Project Spectrum by name, right, as the go-to resource for cybersecurity provisioning there by DoD. The tool development piece of what we're offering is huge. We'll talk a little bit more about that as well from a cyber perspective. That, by the way, is our tool development in-house. That is our proprietary tools that we're building from a cybersecurity perspective, not to be conflated with the third-party tool review site page of our site, which is where we bring in folks who have helpful tools that we believe can be of utility to the small business community from a cyber perspective. And so what are some of the relationships and partnerships that we have with the military services? Well, we've worked with the Office of Small Business Programs for many of the services that you see represented here. In some capacity or another, we've worked with every military service, namely through the sponsorship that they provide for the Mentor Protege program and that cybersecurity pilot that we also facilitate as well. So we also work with a number of federal agencies, that is the Defense Contract Management Agency, who, as you'll recall, they govern that scoring methodology for the self-assessments. And so what Project Spectrum has done is we've basically made sure, painstakingly, by the way, that our self-assessments are in tandem from a scoring methodology perspective, so that when companies come in and they take our self-assessment, not only are they going to glean rather those insights from having gone through the various different control questions that we're talking about there, but they're also going to be able to know that that score can be, if you will, taken to the bank, right? That it's a true representation in compliance with the governing authority for the self-assessment scoring methodology. We talk about the DCSA, or the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency. Specifically here, we've looked at what the CDSC has provided, and that is the Center for Development Security Excellence, which is a directorate under DCSA. And what they've done is, over many, many years, is help train, from a security perspective, many, many different federal agencies within the DoD and beyond. And so what we've done is we've said, you know what, we probably want to make sure that we're looking at what they're doing, that we're reviewing what insights can be gleaned from DCSA. And so great partnership there. The Defense Logistics Agency, you'll recall that the Apex accelerators that we call now were used to be the Procurement and Technical Assistance Centers, or PTACs. They were under DLA at one point. That transition has happened to where now they're under the Defense Department of Defense Office of Small Business Programs. And so a lot of synergies have happened. And in part of how we're here today with you all today is because of those synergies that we can now leverage all the more now that the Apex accelerators around the country, all 97 of them, are under the Department of Defense Office of Small Business Programs guidance and leadership. And so the National Security Agency, we've worked with the Cyber Collaboration Center there, Morgan Adamski, doing some great work out there. If you haven't had a chance to check out what they're doing, it's certainly worth doing as a small business and understanding some of the free resources that are out there. Very helpful, some of the different initiatives that they're engaged in. And we've actually collaborated with Ms. Morgan Adamski. We've had her on our forum under our cyber circuits umbrella, which is where we bring in industry professionals in and around the federal government to share best practices as it relates to things that will be most germane and helpful for small businesses. And so we're very proud of that. Some of the collaborations that we've done, these are just three I'm going to call out here, but these are three of our mainstay collaborations, and we've actually have landing pages on projectspectrum.io for each of these respective collaborations. Obviously, the Department of Defense Mentor Protege program, wherein cybersecurity, hygiene, and training is paramount. The Manufacturing Extension Partnership, huge outreach, and we know that there are huge call-outs both in the NDAA 2023 as relates to the manufacturing sector, one of the big three, as I like to call them. The three main sectors there being manufacturing, knowledge-based services, and research and development. Again, three critical areas to the DIB, and so therefore critical areas for Project Spectrum insofar as our targeting resource provisioning accordingly. Again, the MEP, or the Manufacturing Extension Partnership page of our site, is really a self-directed cybersecurity platform for those manufacturers, namely the smalls. And so what I would encourage everyone to do, if you haven't already, check that side of the page out, or excuse me, that page of the site out, so that you can see, for example, two very distinct scenarios in which we walk through how it is that a small manufacturer would leverage the resources on Project Spectrum from the point at which they've come into the environment at projectspectrum.io to the point at which they've identified areas of opportunity, leveraged the requisite training to be able to speak to those areas of opportunity that have been identified, and then ultimately being able to understand this idea of continuous monitoring and compliance. And so please, if you haven't, it does require you to register. I'll call out that Manufacturing Extension Partnership page does require you to register. Again, basic information, but once you've done so, you'll have access to that and be able to take advantage of all those resources. And again, with those scenarios that I talked about for on the MEP page of our site, while they are on that page and they do speak to what a small manufacturer might do, there are many pieces in terms of the overall sort of coalescence of the resources that Project Spectrum is provisioning. Again, from the point at which any company comes in, you'll be able to see that applicable to any company, not just a small manufacturer. But as it relates to the Small Business Administration, the third partnership I'm going to talk about here, that is, again, obviously germane to all and applicable to all small businesses. But what we've done with the SBA is we know that we want to be closely connected to them, as they are certainly on the front lines in working with small businesses. We have that landing page on our site for their folks that want to come into our environment by way of reaching, through the SBA. They can get to us, but also on our site, they can get to the SBA and understand some of the resources that are out there as well, particularly for small businesses. And so as we talk about, again, self-assessments, just to sort of nail this home and make sure that we're very clear, again, CMMC level 1, level 2, NIST 800-171, the idea and the main takeaway I want you to have here is that these cyber readiness checks, or what we call self-assessments, they're really meant to determine a baseline cybersecurity level, right? And really help companies understand where it is that they are in the process. What are some of the things that each level will require them to meet? And again, CMMC level 1, we're talking about federal contract information, right? Consistent with the Code of Federal Regulations, the CFR. CMMC level 2, again, CUI, dealing with controlled unclassified information. And again, those 110 controls that a company would have to meet at level 2. 17 controls at CMMC level 1, 110 security controls that would need to be met at CMMC level 2. NIST 800-171 specifically is talking about an application of CUI for non-federal systems. That is organizations that are processing, storing, and or transmitting controlled and classified information. Again, really speaking to the security of those non-federal systems when we talk about NIST 800-171. As we talk about some of the compliance assistance that we're providing, so security gap analysis, system security plan assessment and development, and that's a key piece there. So we're going to help you at Project Spectrum not only assess what you have, if you already have, for example, a system security plan, but we're going to help you develop or at least understand what that development is going to look like, right, and advise you accordingly. And that's where the work with the cyber advisement team becomes paramount. The plan of action and milestones, right? So again, from an assessment as well as a development perspective. So if you already have one, we're going to help you there. If you don't have one, we're going to make sure that you understand what is going to be required in order to be able to develop a plan of action and milestone. Again, looking at your security enclave design and architecture, that's going to be a part of what the cyber advisory team is going to be able to do. So if you have questions, they're going to be able to answer those questions. And in some cases, they're going to have discussions with you that are going to provocate certain questions, right? And so that's where I think a lot of the utility is in leveraging the cyber advisory assistance. When those cyber advisors are not steeped in offering assistance and advisory services directly to companies, they're also helping with research services. They're helping with any number of technical inquiries that are coming through our outreach at projectspectrum.io mailbox. And again, I'll show that towards the end of the presentation, so you have that in terms of reaching out to us. They're also steeped with the Mentor Protege program cybersecurity pilot that I talked about, that 2-year program where we're walking through all things cyber for these companies as a part of them taking part in the Mentor Protege program writ large. The tool research and development, that's another area where the cyber advisory team is very much engaged in helping work with our development team and looking at, what is out there related to certain tools, right? And then how do we develop our own offering for our community. Education and training, those same cyber advisors, they're working with our instructional system designers. They're working with our communications team. They're building out content both at the training level, but also looking at compliance requirements, right? And helping to incorporate those into the trainings that we're offering and in any sort of educational videos that we're offering as well. We talk about communications and outreach. Those same cyber advisors, again, are also steeped very heavily into the creation of written material. So the substance that you'll see in our blogs that we're putting out, the substance that you see behind the webinars or actual CMMC trainings, right, that we're producing, those are areas in which the cyber advisors are steeply involved. And again, those videos that we're putting out as well, that content is coming from that cyber advisory team. So needless to say, they're gainfully employed. Best-in-class cybersecurity training and resources. Again, our online training is one of the biggest pieces of what we're doing. We have full scope training courses, as I mentioned, for controlled and classified information for contractors. We have a plan of action and milestones course. We also have a CMMC level 1 and system security plan fundamentals course. We also offer 26 micro courses that are providing training on core CMMC controls, right? So more bite-sized training, if you will, in smaller chunks that may be more palatable for certain people. Again, if they just need that information on those core CMMC controls. Do-it-yourself tools enabling companies to conduct those self-assessments, right? for NIST and CMMC standards. And then, of course, we also offer a FOCI training course, so foreign ownership, control, and influence. If you've heard that term FOCI or FOCI, depending on who you're talking to, that refers to foreign ownership, control, and influence, and we'll talk a bit about that a little bit later here. But what I want to highlight here as it relates to the self-assessments, which again is critical, right? Because it really gives a company an idea of where they stand, right? The customized user dashboard that you're looking at right here is one way that Project Spectrum envisions a company being able to come into our environment. They can take a self-assessment. They can speak with our cyber advisory team, glean those insights, and then look at the requisite or the attending training, depending on their cyber compliance journey, and look at the training that we're offering, incorporate that training, come back and take the cyber self-assessment again, and really see where that improvement has occurred, right? So one of the things we're really looking at is what impact are we having? Are companies getting better by having leveraged the resources on the site? Are they able to see what their progress is, right? From one self-assessment to the next. This is a critical piece of our offering, and this is a great way in which users can see that progression of effort. We also have a means by which any area of the site that, for example, a company has engaged on or visited, they can also see that in one sort of unified dashboard. So if you've looked at, for example, a blog, or maybe you visited a news article, or maybe you were looking at one of the training courses and you didn't make it all the way through, when you come back to it, you'll be able to resume that and see where you left off that in that dashboard, which we find very helpful as well. So I talked a bit about our third-party tool review page, and this is what we call useful tools on our site. But it's a compendium, if you will, a repository of third-party tools that our cyber advisement team has vetted and has looked at and has determined that there is probably some utility that small businesses can glean something from. And so we've taken a vendor-agnostic approach in compiling these third-party tools. And so that way we don't champion any one over the other, right? We're just looking at what is it that that tool purports to do, what is any associated cost, if applicable, and then being able to categorize that tool. So is it a SaaS solution or software as a service solution, right? Is it a government regulatory compliance tool, right? And these are things that we want to make sure that, you know, one of the things we know is that small businesses don't have a ton of time to go to 100 different sites and, you know, rack and stack and compare resources for tools for things that they may not even be aware that they need or don't need, right? And so what we thought was, let's get all the information in, let's leverage our expertise in looking at what those tools purport to offer, and let's figure out if there's some utility for small businesses. And if there is, let's get it on the site all in one area where they can go ahead and look at the efficacy of those tools. And so I talked a little bit about foreign ownership, control, and influence earlier, and I just want to revisit that because it's worth pointing out that in the FY23 National Defense Authorization Act, Section 875 by DOD, that the DOD is to establish a program, excuse me, that demonstrates commercial due diligence tools, techniques, and processes to really help small businesses identify malicious attempts by foreign actors to gain undue access to or foreign ownership control or influence over the business. And so here, what you've probably no doubt heard is that, yes, the US does encourage foreign investment in businesses, right? But the caveat is that there are right and left delimiters to that, right? So to the extent that a company has access to sensitive information for a US-based company, that can be problematic. And that's what that foreign ownership, control, and influence really seeks to speak to. That training course I talked about that Project Spectrum offers, that's going to help you understand those basics of, you know, identifying foreign ownership, control, and influence, evaluating it, and the impact thereof, and then ultimately reducing those risks associated with that. And one of the things we know, as you see on the screen, is that some 50% of all espionage is occurring within that U.S. manufacturing sector. So, you know, one of the things that we do is we want to help small manufacturers understand that there is an operational technology component that is so germane and so critical. And that's, as we talk about some of the tools I'll talk a bit about later, you'll hear me talk about that OT, or operational technology component, specifically germane to those US menufacturers. And so the DoD Mentor Protege Cybersecurity Pilot Program, not to be confused with the Mentor Protege program that DoD offers, right? So DoD offers that Mentor Protege program, and you can find out more about that at business.defense.gov and some of the requirements therein. But what I'm talking about here is something that is related, in that companies that have active agreements with the Mentor Protege program are then able to apply for the Cybersecurity Pilot Program, or the Defense Industrial Base Mentor Protege Program Pilot, which again is designed to really help eligible small businesses improve cybersecurity compliance, hygiene, and incident reporting from a cyber perspective. And we know that companies are successful over this 2-year program, where we're working with them hand in glove, walking them through not only the self-assessments, not only being able to talk to and engage a cyber advisor, as any company would be able to on projectspectrum.io, but going that extra step forward and building out compliance training material so that they can understand actionable sort of next steps, as to where their company needs to go in the future to be able to meet the demands of the impending guidelines that are coming down the pike, as well as the existing DFARS, right? And so we know that companies are successful in this regard if they're able to show increased awareness of and compliance with both NIST 800-171 as well as NIST 800-172. NIST 800-172 being more germane at CMMC level 3, by the way. But it's that demonstration of readiness for cybersecurity maturity model certification, or CMMC, as it were, accreditation, right? That's really what Project Spectrum, one of the main things that we're really focused on, is getting companies ready for what they may invariably have to go through, and will certainly have to go through if they're at level 2 or beyond, right? Meeting with that C3PAL. Maintaining the health and security of users, devices, networks, and data. Again, being able to share best practices with the DoD small business community, all critical pieces there. We talk about these next generation cybersecurity tool development. This is what I've alluded to earlier, but our suite of next generation tools, we believe, are very, very robust and will be helpful to any number of businesses out there, but specifically small businesses. So as we talk about things like deception technology, right? Being able to generate realistic threat data, right? Train intrusion detection capabilities, and mitigate risk to systems and networks. Again, a huge, huge piece, right? Visual network mapping, vulnerability assessment tools that are going to essentially be able to map and replicate manufacturing networks and processes. Again, where that operational technology is key, this vulnerability assessment tool is going to help tremendously in that way. Again, the secure cloud environment. Now, the provisioning of secure storage, processing, and transmission of controlled and classified information through a virtual desktop. This is another element, another aspect of what Project Spectrum is working on very intently. We talk about polymorphic encryption, and that really deals with the protection of sensitive data, both at rest and in transit, and specifically the deployment of multiple algorithms, that is, multiple systematic ways, if you will, of encrypting or making it very, very difficult for adversarial forces to protect data. You can think of you sending an email, right? So from the point at which you hit send in that email, and to the point at which it travels, right, through those servers, right, and it goes to its end destination, there's a lot of points in between there that that data is vulnerable, right, or potentially vulnerable. And so we want to make sure that we're using that polymorphic encryption to be able to help protect that data in motion. And so what then are, as I wrap up here, what then are some of the Project Spectrum differentiators? Well, there's a lot of people there's a lot of companies out there, frankly, that are offering services like where they're posting things on their website that are helpful for small businesses. And those things are great. If it's helping small businesses, that's fantastic. But where I think Project Spectrum really differentiates itself is we have a world-class team of cyber advisors that are at the ready, that are steeped in the technology, that have the experience both from a government and industry experience perspective, right? The fact that we're sponsored and endorsed by the Department of Defense Office of Small Business Programs, the fact that we're offering self-paced tools and training and resources, again, to be able to meet people where they are, meet companies where they are, whether you're a novice, whether you're an expert, or somewhere in between. There's going to be something of utility on Project Spectrum for you. If any of the feedback that we've heard thus far, having talked to small businesses, holds true, it's going to be that there's going to be something for everyone with respect to the provisioning of services. The fact that you can meet with a cyber advisor one-on-one and have them learn about what your environment is, what your particular industry is, and how cyber is going to be germane and relevant to your specific business is frankly invaluable. And again, the last but not least, the services that are provided by Project Spectrum are at no cost to the user. All right. These are services, frankly, and you can go out and check with other folks that are providing similar things. You can check with them and you'll find that in many cases, these services are many hundreds, if not thousands of dollars an hour to be able to, leverage the type of expertise that we're offering, to be able to have them give that individualized attention and then sort of understand what you're doing as a small business and what space you're operating in as it relates to the sort of DFARS regulations, the guidelines that are out there, and some that are coming down the pike. So that insight knowledge, if you will, that we have comes from a very, very close relationship that Project Spectrum has developed, not only with DOD CIO, but with acquisition and sustainment more broadly for DOD. And so just to wrap up here again, just to foot stomp the fact that, again, tools, training, and resources, provisioning from a cyber perspective, again, no cost to the user. We're there to help you meet those federal contracting guidelines and those requirements. But again, it's bigger than that. That's the main thing I want you to take away, is that Project Spectrum is going to help you do all those things in terms of meeting guidelines, impending and existing. But we're also going to be able to help you understand this idea of continuous monitoring, continuous improvement, right? That Kaizen philosophy as it relates to helping your small business position itself to be successful, to being able to do business with the Department of Defense. And then having your security posture be stronger as a whole, right? We're going to help you improve your protection of your small business data, your revenue, the reputation, and the intellectual property that you're no doubt developing and engaging with. And again, this is bigger than just the defense industrial base. This is going to help us with the supply chain writ large and our national security efforts. And so how can you connect with Project Spectrum? Well, you can reach us at projectspectrum.io. That is the main portal with which to get in contact with us, to leverage those resources. The only prerequisite, again, is that you register at no cost at all. You're going to start with your self-assessments to establish your baseline. You're going to access the Project Spectrum comprehensive suite of tools, training, and resources. And again, you have that ability to reach out to the cyber advisor. That is absolutely critical. But you can email us also at outreach@projectspectrum.io. And that is our main sort of contact us email. That email box is triaged. And so we have a number of different areas. So just whatever your issue is or whatever your topic is that you want to discuss, send it to us at outreach@projectspectrum.io. We'll filter that to the respective areas, whether it's a support issue, something you see on the site, whether it is a MPP pilot issue that we're facilitating, or if you just have great feedback for us, or you want us to come out and do a presentation for you, certainly you can reach out to us there as well. We're also on social media, of course, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. And then, of course, I would just say, make sure that you're checking that Project Spectrum calendar of events on our website for upcoming presentations. That's webinars as well, the cyber circuits I talked a little bit about, all of which is going to be immensely beneficial to you as a small business. And so with that, I will take a few questions, general questions, anything that's sort of really specific to your company. I would ask that you send those to outreach@projectspectrum.io. because oftentimes it'll require us to glean more information to be able to speak to that granular level that we want to make sure that we get you the right answer for your particular inquiry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sykes. We do have a couple questions that have been posted in chat that I would like to get to first. One is, could you please communicate on timelines when the CMMC is going to be mandatory for projects bids at GSA and other federal contract mechanisms?
Yes. So, this has got to be the $64 million question, as I always say. And that is, when is CMMC going to be finalized? When is it going to be implemented? When is it going to start showing up in RFPs and solicitations? And if you even go, so I should start with saying that the DOD CIO is the oversight for the CMMC program, right? And what they have said in no uncertain terms is that because they're in this sort of deliberative process where they're evaluating, they're looking at all things germane to the finalization and implementation of this interim rule. And so while they're in that that deliberative process, that they aren't able to communicate any information at this time as to the specifics. What we were leaning towards, there was a point where we were leaning towards September, which obviously has gone and has come and gone, September 23, that we would hopefully hear some more. But that right now is a very tight-lipped, closed process on the DOD CIO, and so I'm not at liberty, obviously, to speak on anything beyond what they have as being the authority there. But I would encourage you to certainly check if you're registered with projectspectrum.io. One of the benefits that we offer is that we're always putting out information to our constituency, either through blast email or through our social platforms. And rest assured that if and when, or not if, rather when is the operative word, because we know that this is moving forward. But when there are updates with regard to that timeline, we'll be certainly sure to communicate those to you all. But what I can tell you, though, along these lines, I know it's not the answer you want to hear, but what I can tell you is that, if we look at the last, we know in December of 21 that the guidance was handed down regarding CMMC 2.0, right? So that was the town hall that was had between the Cyber AB and DOD ANS officials and DOD CIO. And so at that time, we learned obviously about the CMMC 2.0 model. But one of the things that we knew was that this rulemaking process, right? We've gone through the 60-day public comment period, that concurrent congressional review prior to the rule becoming effective. There's been these steps, right, where DOD has advanced this whole effort, right? There's been a lot of time, effort, energy, and money, frankly, put behind the sort of progression of this. And so that's why we're encouraging companies, do not wait until this actually starts showing up in solicitations for obvious reasons, right? Make sure that you're registered with us, taking advantage of the resources that avail themselves, again, at no cost, because the reality is that, we don't know how long it's going to take, each and every business to be able to get to the level of compliance that they need to get to, right? It's going to depend on a lot of factors. It's going to depend on what is their existing infrastructure. It's going to depend on what resources within their company they have to allocate towards working with our team, right? So all of these factors are going to come into play as to what that timeline is going to look like before a company's ready for, to be ready for certification ultimately. And so that's why we're saying get in there now, take advantage of the resources, start working your way toward at minimum CMMC level 1, I would say. And then again, reaching out to the cyber as appropriate so that you can get more refined guidance that's going to be more specific and germane to your company's cyber compliance journey.
Thank you, Mr. Sykes. Here's our next question. Do the tools developed in-house for Project Spectrum require access to business systems and computers and processes? To what level do they access a business's resources and artifacts?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And what I would say to that, Those tools that we're engaging with, they're actually still being worked on as we speak. And so I'm not really at liberty to put anything out there as yet. But I can tell you that the idea is that they're going to be positioned in such a way that they're able to, certainly for some of them, obviously there's going to be a need to be able to access some company information in order to be able to just use the tool, right, for its own efficacy. But I'm not at liberty to speak on the extent to what that will be. But I can assure you that those concerns, a very concern is the precipice of that question. Those concerns are certainly being taken into account by both our development and our cyber advisement team, because the goal again is not for them to be prohibitive or not for them to put companies' data, out there unnecessarily, right? It's to be able to help do the converse, to protect that data and to utilize those tools in such a way that's going to be effective and efficient to be able to protect and thwart some of those threat vectors that exist out there. So those are certainly some of the things that are being under consideration, is the short answer. And we expect full operating capability of these tools as we get into FY 2025. But I can tell you that the team is hot and heavy thinking about all things germane to precisely what that question alludes to.
Right, I have another question. If you have any recommendations for top antivirus companies and VPNs for small businesses that work in conjunction with one another?
Yeah, so again, this is one of the areas, and it's a great question. One of the areas I would certainly refer you to our cyber advisement team. These are the types of things that they're steeped in, and so they'll be able to advise you accordingly in a vendor agnostic way, right? So they're gonna look at what specifically are you looking to do with antivirus, right? Obviously, generally we know what that consists of. But again, looking at your environment, looking at how that's going to be germane specifically to the types of information you're handling, right? And all factors germane to that, right? So what I would say is definitely reach out to us at that outreach at projectspectrum.io you see on the screen to get that more sort of individualized answer there.
And our next question, the Mentor Protege pilot program is a total 2-year program. Please, and how do we start? And is that something which we can be done faster or break from?
Yeah, so it's one of those things that again, it's going to depend on the resources that your company is able to put towards it. And what I'll say though is that even after that 2-year period, right, has expired, it doesn't mean that your access to, for example, the site and a lot of those resources on the site goes away, right? We understand that there's this idea of continuous monitoring, continuous improvement, and so you still have access to all those resources that are on the site. But if you're interested in that cybersecurity pilot program, I would say send us an email at outreach@projectspectrum.io. I will caveat again, just to reiterate that at present you do need to have an active agreement in the Mentor Protege program. That is the program overarching for the DoD. So if you have an active agreement with the DoD Mentor Protege program, you are then able and eligible to apply for that cybersecurity pilot program.
And those are all the questions I see right now in the chat. If anybody has another question, if you want to go ahead and take yourself off of mute, you can do so or put it in the chat. We'll give it a couple minutes here.
And while we're waiting there, Karen, I'll just highlight, some of the things I think are worth talking about through here as relates to CMMC 2.0. One of the things that we know that I think is pretty important here, and this is why I think our plan of action and milestones course is really critical. One of the things we learned in December of 21 with regard to the plan of action and milestones and the waivers is that there were going to be the guidance that was issued with that they're going to be strictly time bound. Prior to that, there have been this very loose sort of nature around, how it is that the plans of action and milestones would be handled. And again, this is germane, just for everybody's edifice here. This is, when we talk about POAMs or plans of action and milestones, we're talking about if a company, we've gone through, they've identified the areas that they're meeting, but there's invariably areas that maybe they're not meeting, right? And so that plan of action and milestones is really a form with which they can list out those items that they're not quite in compliance with yet. And then it also talks about kind of a plan for remediation, right? Well, that time frame was very loose before, meaning prior to the advent of CMMC 2.0 in December of 21. What we've known since December of 2021 is that again, it's going to be strictly time bound. So potentially 180 days, so 6 months, right, to resolution on those items that are identified in that plan of action milestones, right? Areas that the company is not meeting at that time. And so one of the things that we've learned is that there's going to be limited use, right? That plans of action and milestones under the guidance for 2.0 for the highest weighted requirements. They're not going to allow for the highest weighted requirements, that they're going to establish a minimum score requirement to support certification with those plans of action and milestones, right? And this is, again, where I think it's very critical, and where Project Spectrum's coursework is speaking to what this is talking to, in that it's getting you ready, understanding what will be placed on a plan of action and milestones, right? How much time you have to resolve it, what are the remediation strategies there. That's all of the things that course is going to be talking about. And again, if there's questions, and invariably there will be, those cyber advisors are right there at the ready to answer those questions. When it talks about waivers under 2.0 for CMMC, right, they're going to be allowed on a very limited basis, and they have to be accompanied by strategies to mitigate that controlled unclassified information risk, right? Only allowable in mission critical instances, strictly time bound, and again, are going to require senior DOD approval, those waivers, right? So it's this idea that as the guidance evolves, so too does Project Spectrum's training and guidelines to be in tandem there.
Thank you, Mr. Sykes. It was a great presentation today. We've got kudos to you in the chat for a great presentation. I want to ditto that. I'd also like to thank my co-sponsors for today's event. And I see Ann Parrott and Rodney Young from our Southern Ohio Apex Accelerator on here today. So thank you guys for co-sponsoring this with us at the Ohio University Apex Accelerator. That's going to wrap things up for today. We did record this, and we'll be posting this on the Ohio University YouTube channel. And I will also be sending out a PDF of Mr. Sykes' presentation to all attendees. So thank you again, Mr. Sykes and your team. Wonderful presentation. And thank you everyone for being here today.
Thank you. Take care. We're happy to be here.